I'm Victoria Henderson, and let me tell you a story, my story. It's not a fairy tale. It doesn't start with once upon a time, and it sure as hell doesn't end with happily ever after. It's a story about betrayal. About a man who looked me in the eye every night and told me he loved me while building another life behind my back, about a woman who thought she'd found a good man, only to discover she was standing on the same battlefield I was, neither of us knowing the war had already begun, and about a child innocent, caught in the wreckage of lies she never asked for. For years I believed in marriage, in promises, in love. I believed that if you gave everything, your heart, your hope, your time, that somehow life would be kind in return. It wasn't. But here's the thing about breaking a woman like me. You'd better finish the job, because if you leave her standing, even in pieces, she will rebuild stronger, smarter, sharper. So when I found those tiny pink shoes tucked in my husband's suitcase, I didn't scream. I started planning. And what came next? Well, you'll want to hear this part. The day I found the shoes, they tumbled out of the suitcase as if some unseen hand had pushed them. Two impossibly small, impossibly perfect shoes, baby pink, soft leather, still tagged. I stood there frozen, my breath caught somewhere between my chest and my throat. We'd been married 8 years. 8 long years filled with laughter, routine, holidays, and heartbreaks. The biggest of which had been the one we shared in silence, infertility. 3 years of doctors and shots and treatments and whispered reassurances in the middle of the night. 3 years of blaming my body for not giving us what we wanted most. And now here they were, size 2 tubes sitting on the same bedroom carpet where I'd cried over every failed cycle. "Victoria, can you grab my gray tie?" Richard called from the shower, his voice casual, humming through the steam. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My fingers trembled as I picked up the shoes. The tag read Nordstrom Baby. High-end, exactly the kind of gift Richard would buy if he wanted to impress someone. Or someone else. I placed them back in the suitcase carefully, deliberately, exactly where I'd found them. My pulse thundered in my ears, but outwardly I was calm. I'd trained for this. I'd learned to mask pain. 3 years of infertility had made me an expert at pretend. Richard emerged minutes later, towel wrapped around his waist, water glistening in his dark hair. "Hey, babe, you okay? You look a little pale." I forced a smile. "Just tired, that's all." He kissed my forehead, a cold, hollow gesture. "Once I'm back from this Austin trip, we should book that Hawaii getaway we talked about. You need a break." Austin? He'd said he was flying to Austin. 3 days, business meetings, alone. Liar. I watched him dress, tie his tie, not his polished shoes. I watched the man. I'd built a life with Lee to my face so effortlessly. When he finally left for the office, briefcase in hand, I sat at the kitchen island with a mug of coffee that tasted like ash. The walls of our perfect suburban home seemed to lean in, pressing against me. The framed photos on the shelves mocked me. Richard's smiling face, the vacations, the Christmases, all of it suddenly false. But I didn't cry. Not yet. I opened his laptop. Password? Still our anniversary, September 17th. How poetic, how predictable. The inbox unfolded like a confession. "Can't wait to see you and Lily this weekend. Bought something special for our little princess." Lily, the baby had a name. Our baby never existed. But his did. My stomach twisted. I kept reading. "Tell Lily Daddy will be there Friday night, just the 3 of us." Friday night, just the 3 of us. The woman was named Samantha Flores, 26, worked at a coffee shop in Austin. They'd been together 2 years. Lily was 18 months old. I did the math. She'd been conceived while I was injecting hormones and watching each month end in blood and tears. While I blamed myself for being broken, he was making a child with another woman. A wave of cold fury swept through me, but I stayed methodical, focused, ruthless. I printed everything: emails, photos, gift receipts, travel records, every lie, every betrayal documented and time-stamped. Then I picked up my phone and called Monica, my older sister, photographer, lived in Austin, had a network of people who owed her favors. "Victoria, what's wrong? You sound—" "I need a favor, big one, no questions." A pause. Then, "Okay, what do you need?" I gave her Richard's flight details, hotel reservation, dinner plans, Samantha's address. "Follow him, watch him, get photos, videos, everything." "Victoria, are you sure?" "I've never been more sure in my life." When I hung up, I was already making my next call. To Kate Turner, my best friend and a private investigator's right hand. This wasn't just about a broken marriage anymore. This was war. And I was going to win. I barely remembered making the second call. My fingers moved on instinct, scrolling to Kate Turner's name, my voice steady though my heart raced. "Kate, I need a full workup on someone. Name's Samantha Flores, lives in Austin, early 20s, works at Bean There Coffee." A beat of silence. "Victoria, what the hell's going on?" "I can't explain right now. Just do this for me, please." Kate had known me long enough to recognize that tone. "Give me a few hours." I hung up and stared at my reflection in the microwave door. My own eyes looked foreign, harder, colder, a version of me I hadn't seen before. The waiting was the hardest part. I moved through the house like a ghost, folding laundry, wiping counters that didn't need wiping, trying to outrun the storm building inside me. But the storm wasn't going anywhere. By evening, my email pinged. Kate had delivered. Subject: Samantha Flores, report attached. I opened the file with trembling fingers. Single mother. One daughter, Lily Flores, age 18 months. No record of a current partner listed anywhere public. Richard had played his cards well. To Samantha, he was a traveling salesman who visited twice a month. She had no idea he was married. The photos hit harder than I'd expected. Richard pushing Lily on a swing, holding her hand, feeding her ice cream, smiling at them both with a warmth he hadn't shown me in years. My throat tightened, my vision blurred. "Don't cry, not yet." Another ping, this time from Monica. "Got what you asked for. Sending photos soon. You okay?" I typed back, "Not even close." Her photos arrived minutes later. I scrolled through them one by one. Richard unlocking Samantha's apartment door, carrying grocery bags, sitting on the couch with Lily in his lap, reading a book. The captions burned into my brain. Friday night, just the three of us. He had a second life, a second family, a second daughter, and I had nothing. I shut the laptop, my hands ice cold despite the heat creeping through the house. For years, I'd let Richard shape my reality, convince me that our struggles were ours alone, that our pain was shared. But now I saw it clearly. I had been alone for a long, long time, and I wasn't going to be alone anymore. I poured a glass of wine, forced myself to sip it slowly. I needed to think rationally, strategically. The old me would have confronted him, screamed, demanded answers, but the old me was gone. The new me? She was going to burn it all down. Carefully, methodically, beautifully. At midnight, I opened a blank notebook and started a list. 1. Secure evidence. 2. Ally with Samantha, if possible. 3. Legal leverage. Meet with Kate's contact. 4. Emotional prep. Be ready for the confrontation. 5. Final move. Plan the exit. I underlined that last point 3 times. There was no going back. Somewhere around 2 a.m., I heard Richard's key in the front door. I stayed in bed, eyes closed, breaths even. He kissed my forehead softly as he slid in beside me. His skin smelled faintly of Samantha's perfume. And still, I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I was already somewhere else entirely. By dawn, I had booked a flight to Austin, one way. I packed light, a change of clothes, my laptop, the folder of printed emails and photos, and the shoes. I placed them carefully in my carry-on, a reminder, a talisman. By noon, I was boarding as the plane lifted off. I looked out the window at the shrinking world below. Everything I thought I knew was gone. But that wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. What's waiting for Victoria on the other side of this flight? Any guesses? Don't miss the next chapter. Chapter 2. The woman behind the emails. If she was another me, then maybe we weren't enemies after all. That thought echoed in my mind as the plane touched down in Austin, its wheels screeching against the tarmac like a warning I couldn't unhear. I had spent the entire flight staring at the cloudless sky, willing myself not to imagine the worst. But my imagination was stubborn. I'd seen the emails, the photos. I knew her name now, Samantha Flores. I knew her daughter's name, Lily, and yet I didn't know her. Was she complicit, manipulative, another woman who had smiled knowingly as my life unraveled? Or was she, like me, collateral damage in Richard's selfish little war? I needed to find out. Monica met me outside the terminal, camera slung over her shoulder, her eyes sharp with unspoken questions. "You look like hell." "I feel worse. You got everything?" She nodded. "Full set of photos, and before you ask, yes, I followed your instructions. No contact, no confrontation." I squeezed her hand. "Good. Now I need one more favor." "Name it." "Take me to her." Bean There Coffee sat on a sun-bleached corner of 6th Street, tucked between a vintage bookstore and an overpriced yoga studio. Charming, unassuming, exactly the kind of place where a young mom might work to make ends meet. I took a deep breath and walked in. It was late morning. The place hummed with soft jazz, clinking mugs, and quiet conversation. Behind the counter, a slender brunette moved gracefully between customers, her long hair pulled into a loose braid. Samantha. She looked younger than I'd expected. Maybe 26, just as Kate's report had said. No makeup, no jewelry. A plain black apron over faded jeans. There was a lightness about her. The kind of tired but contented glow you only saw in young mothers. And there, tucked behind the counter in a battered stroller, was Lily. Tiny, dark curls, big eyes, Richard's eyes. My stomach twisted. I ordered a coffee I didn't want, slid into a corner booth and watched. Samantha was good with people. Warm smile, patient. I hated her for that, for not fitting the image I'd built of the scheming mistress. But hate was a slippery thing. It shifted the longer I sat there. She wasn't wearing expensive clothes, no flashy jewelry, no ring. Just a woman trying to keep her world afloat. Damn you, Richard. I waited until the crowd thinned. When she retreated to the counter to refill napkins, I pulled out my phone and dialed the cafe's number. She answered on the third ring. "Bean There Coffee?" "This is Samantha." My voice was steady. "Hi. This might sound crazy, but I think we need to talk." Silence. "I'm sorry. Your boyfriend?" "Richard Henderson. I'm his wife." The line went dead quiet. "Are you there?" I asked. Her voice, when it came, was small. He said he wasn't married. He lied." I paused, choosing my words carefully. "I'm not here to fight you. We're both victims here. Let me buy you lunch. Let me explain." Another long pause. Then, "Okay, after my shift." I spent the next 2 hours pacing the bookstore next door, my nerves fraying with every tick of the clock. What would I say? How could I tell this young woman that her life, her daughter's life, was built on a foundation of lies? When I returned to the cafe, Samantha was already waiting outside, stroller folded beside her. Her face was pale, her eyes wary but resolute. "There's a diner down the block," she said quietly. We walked in silence. The booth was sticky, the coffee lukewarm, none of it mattered. Samantha folded her hands on the table, her voice shaking. "Show me." I pulled out the folder. Wedding photos, house photos, emails, flight receipts. Her hands trembled as she flipped through them, her eyes filled with tears. He told me he loved me, that he wanted to marry me once his business stabilized. I reached across the table. He's never leaving me, Samantha. Men like Richard don't leave. They just keep lying. She wiped her tears angrily. I'm so stupid. No, you're not. He's very good at lying. He had me fooled for years. She stared at me, something shifting behind her eyes. What do we do now? And there it was, the moment I'd been waiting for. We make him pay, I said. We make him pay. The words hung between us like a loaded gun, daring one of us to pull the trigger first. Samantha blinked, her tear-streaked face hardening. Her hands were still trembling. But there was steel forming behind her eyes now, the same steel I'd felt growing inside me since I'd found those pink shoes. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her sleeve. How? I exhaled slowly. I had played this conversation in my head 100 different ways on the flight over, but now, sitting across from her, watching her fight for composure, I realized something. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about us. 2 women, 2 lives shattered by the same man, and we were stronger together. First, you need to decide if you want to be part of this. Samantha looked down at the photo of Richard pushing Lily on a swing. She touched the edge of the picture with a shaking finger. I want him to pay for what he's done to me. And to Lily. I nodded. Then, here's what we do. I pulled out my notebook. The one I'd started back in Charlotte, now filled with hastily scribbled plans and bullet points. Step 1. We gather more evidence. Everything. Every visit. Every gift. Every lie he's told you. I already have some from my end, but we need to tighten the net. Samantha's voice steadied. I can get messages, photos. He sends me money, sometimes through apps. I can pull the records. Good. What about legal stuff? She asked. That's where my friend Kate comes in. She works with a private investigator. I've already got her digging. Samantha leaned back, her eyes narrowing. You've thought this through. I've had a few sleepless nights to plan. She gave a small, bitter smile. Welcome to the club. We sat there for a while, 2 strangers bound by betrayal, sipping bad diner coffee that had long since gone cold. I studied her. This woman wasn't my enemy. She was me. 3 years ago, hopeful, in love, trusting a man who was incapable of telling the truth. You know, I said, quietly, if we do this right, Lily will have what she deserves. Security, a future. You won't have to live in fear of him anymore. Samantha's chin quavered, but she nodded. I want that for her. I reached across the table, offering my hand. She took it without hesitation. An alliance was born in that moment, not out of friendship, not yet, but out of necessity, out of survival. I'll be in touch, I said. There's one more piece I need to set in motion. What's that? Making sure when the time comes, Richard has no idea what's about to hit him. I left the diner with a new purpose burning through my veins. The fear that had gripped me back in Charlotte was gone, replaced by cold determination. Monica was waiting in the car when I slid into the passenger seat. How'd it go? She asked. She's in. Monica let out a low whistle. Damn, okay. What now? I pulled out my phone. There was one more call to make, and this one would set everything into motion. I dialed Kate's number. Victoria, I've been waiting. I need everything you can dig up on Richard. Finances, property, any hidden accounts. And I need it fast. Kate's voice was sharp. Got it, Alu, and my team. How deep do you want us to go? I glanced out the window, watching families pass by on the sunlit sidewalks, all the way to the bone. By the time Monica dropped me back at my hotel, the adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. But there was no rest yet. I opened my laptop and began compiling everything Samantha and I had. Photos, messages, dates, receipts. Piece by piece, I was building a case that Richard wouldn't see coming, and when it hit, he would have nowhere to run. If you were in Victoria's shoes right now, what would you do next? Share your thoughts below and stay tuned for the next part of her story. Chapter 3. The plan that would break him, to destroy a man like Richard. You don't scream, you sharpen the knife. Slowly. That was the thought that kept me company as I stared at my hotel ceiling at 3 a.m., my notebook open on the nightstand, pen in hand. I wasn't here for an emotional outburst, not for revenge served cold or hot. I was here for the slow, surgical dismantling of a life built on lies. And I wanted Richard to watch it crumble. Piece by excruciating piece. By sunrise, I had outlined the core of our plan. Phase 1, secure leverage. Phase 2, control the narrative. Phase 3, force the choice. Phase 4, strip him clean, legally, financially, emotionally. It wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about power, about taking back what Richard had stolen from me. Control, truth, dignity. At 9 a.m. sharp, I met Kate Turner in a small private office she'd arranged just outside downtown Austin. Kate was tall, lean, sharp as a blade. We'd been friends since college, but today she looked at me like a strategist meeting a fellow general. "You've come a long way from Charlotte for this." "I didn't come this far to fail." She slid a folder across the table. "I pulled what I could overnight. Richard's assets, 3 properties, 2 in Charlotte, 1 rental in Asheville, 2 joint bank accounts with you, 1 personal account in his name only. And here's the kicker." She flipped to the next page. "A series of PayPal and Venmo transactions. He's been funneling money to Samantha under the radar, small amounts, child support, gifts, just enough to stay off your joint statements." I clenched my jaw. "That's our money. Not for long, the paper trail is enough to establish intent. He's been hiding income, which will not play well in court." "Good. What about travel records?" "All synced with his work calendar, but I've flagged 4 trips marked client meetings that match hotel stays near Samantha's place." I leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Piece by piece. We'll need more," I said. "More proof, photos, dates, messages." "You'll get it." Kate's eyes gleamed. "But there's more." She handed me another page, one I hadn't expected. Richard applied for a personal line of credit last month, $60,000. I stared at the number. Why? Hard to say yet, but men like Richard don't change overnight. He's preparing for something. Maybe to keep this other life going if things get shaky, Kate nodded. Or to buy silence. I gripped the table's edge. Not anymore. I want everything exposed. Everything. By noon, I met Samantha again at a quiet park on the edge of town. Lily was napping in her stroller. Samantha looked both exhausted and determined. I laid out the plan carefully, step by step. We let him think everything is normal. No confrontations. No hint that we know. She nodded. "I can do that. Next, you collect every message, every financial transaction, every voicemail you can find. Kate will help clean it up and organize it." "Okay." And then we bait him. Samantha looked up. "How?" "You text him, tell him something happened at work, you need him to come see you. Alone, at your place. Meanwhile, Monica and I will be ready. We'll document everything." Samantha hesitated, then squared her shoulders. "I'll do it." I touched her arm gently. "Are you sure?" She looked down at Lily, then back at me. "I'm sure. For her." Later that evening, back in my hotel room, I watched Monica's latest photos scroll across my screen. Richard smiling with Lily, holding Samantha's hand at the park, playing family. Soon this will all end, I thought. My phone buzzed, a text from Kate. Pulled his last credit card statements, booked a dinner at Le Jardin for Friday, same day as his next business trip. I smiled grimly. "Perfect." I called Samantha. "Ready?" Her voice was steady. "Ready, then send the message." By Friday morning, the pieces were in place. Kate's team had secured the financial documents, tracked Richard's movements, and tied up the last loose ends. Samantha had sent the text just as we'd planned. Emergency at work. Can't leave. Can you come to the apartment around 6, just for a little while? Richard's reply had been immediate. Of course, be there at 6. I stared at those words on Samantha's phone like a hunter studying its prey. He was walking into this willingly. The hours crawled. Monica and I spent the afternoon prepping Samantha's apartment, setting up discreet cameras, ensuring every angle would be covered. No screaming, no fights, just facts, just evidence, and one carefully staged confrontation that would give us exactly what we needed. Samantha paced the living room, her nerves fraying with every minute. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered at one point, her voice shaking. I touched her shoulder gently. "You can. You have to." She glanced at Lily, asleep in her crib, innocent and unaware of the storm about to hit. "For her," Samantha whispered. "For both of you." At 5:30, Kate texted, "He left the hotel. On his way." The air in the apartment seemed to thicken, every sound magnified, the hum of the fridge, the tick of the wall clock. At 5:55, we took our positions. Samantha remained in the living room, phone in hand. Monica and I waited behind the kitchen partition, hidden from view but able to hear everything. I felt my heart pounding, adrenaline coiling tight in my chest. No turning back now. At 6:15, there was a knock. "Jess, you home?" Richard's voice drifted through the door. Casual, cheerful. "I brought Lily those shoes we talked about." I met Samantha's gaze one last time. She nodded, her face pale but steady. Then she opened the door. I stepped out first. "Hi, Richard." The look on his face was worth every sleepless night. Shock, confusion, panic. "Victoria? What? How? Not what you expected," I said softly. "Come in." He stood frozen for a moment, torn between fight and flight, but pride won out. He stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind him. "Look, I can explain. You'll have the chance. But first, sit." I motioned to the chair opposite Samantha, who sat cradling Lily, now awake in her arms. Richard's gaze flicked between us, sweat beading on his brow. "I don't understand." "You understand perfectly," I cut in, "and so will everyone else when we're done here." For the next 15 minutes, Samantha and I walked him through the timeline. Every lie, every visit, every dollar transferred. I laid out the emails, the financial records, the photos Monica had captured. Richard's face paled with each new piece of evidence. His words became slower, slurred, desperate. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." "No," I said coldly, "you weren't supposed to get caught." At last, I leaned forward. "Here's what happens next. You will choose. Right here, right now." Richard swallowed hard. "Choose? Me? And everything you'll lose in the process. Or Samantha and Lily and what you'll be forced to give them." I let the words hang in the air, a blade waiting to fall. "But you don't get both anymore. That game is over." Richard looked at Samantha, at Lily reaching for him with tiny hands, babbling softly. Tears welled in his eyes. Then he turned to me. "I choose you." "Good," I whispered. "Then I hope you're ready to live with that choice." Victoria just forced Richard to choose. But what consequences will that choice bring? Stay tuned. The next chapter is coming. Chapter 4. The night he couldn't choose. Sometimes the hardest cage to escape is the one you built yourself. That's what I thought as I watched Richard sit across from me, shoulders sagging, eyes darting like a trapped animal. He'd made his choice. Or so he thought. "I choose you," he had said, as if those words could undo 2 years of lies, as if they could erase the life he'd built behind my back, the child, the other woman, the second home. But in that moment, I wasn't the woman he had lied to anymore. I was the woman holding the knife, and I wasn't going to flinch. The room felt smaller than it was, the air thick with tension. Samantha sat silently beside me, her grip on Lily tight, her knuckles white. The baby squirmed in her lap, sensing the storm in the room. Richard kept glancing at her, at me, back and forth, like a man drowning, searching for a hand that wouldn't come. "Victoria, please, I can explain." I leaned forward, my voice cold. "You don't get to explain anymore, Richard. You get to listen." His mouth opened, then closed. He swallowed hard. "You chose me," I continued. "So here's what that choice means." I laid the folder of evidence between us. Emails, bank records, travel logs, photos. Every piece meticulously collected, every lie preserved in black and white. "You will sign the divorce papers. You will surrender the house, the cars, and every asset we shared. You will pay child support for Lily until she turns 18. You will have no contact with Samantha or Lily ever again." Richard's face contorted. "That's not fair." "Fair?" Samantha's voice cut through the room like a whip. "Was it fair when you told me you wanted to marry me? When you let me believe Lily would have a father?" Richard's gaze dropped to the floor. I pressed on. "You will comply, or everything in this folder goes public. Your boss, your clients, your family, everyone will know exactly what kind of man you are." His breath quickened. "You can't. You wouldn't." I leaned closer. "Try me." There was a long, suffocating silence. Then, slowly, Richard looked up at Samantha. "Jess, please. Don't do this." Samantha's eyes were full of tears, but her voice was steel. "You already chose, Richard. You chose her. You chose to abandon us." Lily whimpered, reaching out with tiny fingers toward her father. The innocence of the gesture cut deeper than any words could. Richard's lip trembled. "I love her. I love both of you." "No," I said firmly. "You love yourself. That's why we're here." The minutes dragged, each one heavier than the last. Finally, Richard buried his face in his hands. His shoulders shook once, twice, then stilled. "Fine," he whispered hoarsely. "I'll do it." I exhaled slowly. "You'll sign everything by Monday. I'll have the documents delivered. If you fight this, if you so much as breathe a word to anyone, this goes public, understand?" A weak nod. "Good." Samantha stood then, clutching Lily tightly. "Come on, baby, we're leaving." Richard rose instinctively. "Just wait." I blocked his path. "You made your choice. Let her go." For a moment I thought he might push past me, that the man I'd once loved would show his true colors here and now, but he didn't. He sank back into the chair, defeated. We watched as Samantha walked to the bedroom, gathered 2 suitcases and Lily's diaper bag, then moved to the door without another word. At the threshold, she turned back once. Her eyes met mine. "Thank you," she whispered. I nodded. Then she was gone. 20 minutes later, only Richard and I remained. The room felt cavernous now, the echo of Samantha's final words still lingering like smoke. Richard sat slumped in the armchair, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. His carefully constructed world had begun to crack, and he knew it. But the cracks weren't enough. Not yet. I wanted it to collapse. "Look at me," I said. Slowly he lifted his head. His eyes were red, face drawn and pale. "You think this is over," I continued, voice calm, deliberate. "It's not." He swallowed hard. "What more do you want from me?" I crossed my arms, holding his gaze. "I want you to understand exactly what you've done, and exactly what's coming." I picked up the folder once more and laid it open on the coffee table. Not to show him anything new, but to remind him, this is your life now. Every document, every transfer, every lie, all documented. If you try to fight the divorce, if you try to dodge your financial obligations, or if you even think about contacting Samantha or Lily again, this folder goes public. Your boss will see it, your clients will see it, your family will see it. Richard's shoulders sagged further, defeat sinking in. "I won't fight," he whispered. "I'll sign whatever you want." I wasn't finished. "And one more thing," I said, leaning closer. I know about the $60,000 line of credit you took out last month. His head snapped up, eyes wide with panic. You? How? I told you, Richard. I see everything now. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, realization dawning. If you try to use that money to cover your tracks, to buy silence, or to escape your responsibilities, I will make sure you lose more than just your reputation. You'll lose everything. I let the words settle like ash. Victoria. His voice cracked. Please, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. For a moment I stared at him. This man I had once built a life with, this man who had held me through sleepless nights, whispered promises of forever, sat beside me through every failed fertility treatment, and yet here he was, exposed for what he truly was: selfish, weak, and incapable of honesty. You meant every choice you made, I said quietly, and now you will live with the consequences. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence that followed. I rose, gathering the folder, slipping it into my bag. You'll receive the papers Monday. Kate's office will handle the rest. Richard looked up, tears brimming. Do you still love me? The question struck me harder than I expected. Once I would have said yes without hesitation. Now, I studied him, this man who had once been my everything. I loved the man I thought you were, I said softly. But that man doesn't exist. His face crumpled. Victoria, please, we can fix this. We can. No. I cut him off, my voice firm. You killed us the day you touched another woman. You buried us the day Lily was born. Tonight, I'm just reading the eulogy. I turned, walking toward the door, my heart oddly calm. As my hand touched the knob, Richard's voice stopped me one last time. What happens now? He asked, voice small. I paused, gaze fixed on the door in front of me. Now, I said, turning slightly. Now I go home, and you start counting the days until everything you value is gone. If you were Victoria, what would you do next? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't miss the next chapter. Chapter 5. The Wife Who Held the Knife. A blade cuts deeper when the victim thinks it's a hug. That thought stayed with me as I drove Richard to the airport 2 days later. My hand steady on the wheel, my expression unreadable. He sat slumped in the passenger seat, staring out the window, defeated. The man who once held court in boardrooms and smiled charmingly across dinner tables was gone. In his place was someone smaller, someone who finally understood that the woman beside him wasn't going to be his safety net anymore. I had already started cutting, he just hadn't bled yet. The morning after our confrontation, I'd met with Kate in her office. She was waiting for me with a cup of strong black coffee and a stack of documents. Here it is, she said. Divorce petition. Motion to seize joint assets pending proceedings. Restraining order draft if he so much as thinks about contacting Samantha or Lily. I flipped through the papers, every word giving me a strange kind of power. This wasn't about revenge anymore. Not entirely. It was about control. About taking back what was stolen. And the credit line? I asked. Kate smiled thinly. Already frozen. We sent notice to the issuing bank first thing this morning. If he tries to touch that money, they'll flag it immediately. I exhaled. Good. And the media leak? Kate's eyes gleamed. We sit on that. Unless he makes a move. One wrong step and this whole story will be on every local outlet by dinner. I nodded. Then, we're ready. Now, as we approached the airport, I could feel Richard's gaze flick toward me again and again. I didn't speak, let him sit in the silence he'd created. Finally, as we turned into the parking structure, he broke. Victoria, are you happy now? I pulled into a spot, shifted the car into park, and faced him fully. No, I said simply. But I'm not broken anymore. He flinched. You still want kids with me? I almost laughed, the absurdity of the question hitting like a slap. Richard, I leaned closer. I'm not the same woman who helped you pack 3 days ago. That woman loved you, trusted you, wanted a life with you. The woman sitting here, I paused, letting the words land. She wants your world to burn. His face went white. Victoria, please, we can fix this. I'll do anything. You'll do exactly what's in those papers, and then you'll disappear. His shoulders sagged. I can't believe this is happening. I smiled coldly. Believe it. And believe this. If you try to fight me, if you so much as blink the wrong way, I will destroy what little reputation you have left. I handed him a sealed envelope. Inside are the papers. You'll receive the full legal packet from Kate by Monday. I expect your signature without delay. Richard stared at the envelope as if it might explode. Victoria, I chose you. No, I said softly. You chose yourself 2 years ago. This, I gestured between us, this is just me making sure you finally live with that choice. As he stepped out of the car, suitcase in hand, he turned back one last time. Will I ever see you again? I met his gaze. Not if you value what's left of your life. Then I drove away, leaving him standing alone in that cold concrete garage. The first of many goodbyes he'd have to face. Back at my house, I moved with purpose. Richard's clothes were already packed, his belongings boxed and labeled, every trace of him gone. I walked through each room, scrubbing away the ghosts of a life that no longer belonged to me. By the time I poured a glass of wine that evening, the house felt bigger, quieter, lighter, and I felt stronger. But I wasn't done. Tomorrow the real knife would land, and Richard had no idea where I'd strike next, and I wasn't about to give him a chance to breathe. By sunrise, I was already dressed, the folder of documents under my arm as I walked into Kate's office. She greeted me with that same sharp grin I'd come to rely on. You look like a woman ready to bury a body. Close, I said. Ready to bury a reputation. We spent the next hour finalizing every detail. The divorce petition was set for delivery that afternoon. The motion to seize the joint assets had already been approved by the judge. Kate's firm worked with fast track thanks to the overwhelming evidence we had compiled. He won't be able to touch a dime without our permission, Kate confirmed. I nodded. Good. And the credit line? Frozen? Permanently? The bank's compliance department flagged it. He'll get the call today. I smiled, let him squirm. By noon, the first domino fell. Kate's assistant sent me a text. Divorce packet served at his office. Confirmed receipt. I could almost picture the scene. Richard in his glass-walled office, smile fading as he opened the envelope. But I wasn't finished. Next came the financial blow. Through Kate's firm, we filed a formal petition demanding full financial disclosure. Every asset, every hidden account, every transfer to Samantha or otherwise. If he lied, he'd face perjury charges. If he complied, we'd have legal grounds to strip him clean. A win-win. That afternoon, I met Samantha at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. She looked exhausted but resolute, Lily napping in the stroller beside her. I slid a copy of the filing across the table. It's done. She exhaled shakily. Thank you. You don't need to thank me. You need to be ready. She frowned. Ready for what? For when he tries to fight back. And he will. Samantha's gaze hardened. I won't fold. I believed her. Good. Because if he does reach out, you contact Kate's office immediately. They'll handle the rest. She nodded. I reached into my bag and handed her a second envelope. Inside is the first payment on the trust account Kate and I set up for Lily. It's yours, for her education. Her future. Samantha's eyes filled with tears. Victoria, you don't owe me anything, I interrupted gently. This is about making sure he can't take anything else from either of us. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. In that moment, I didn't see her as the other woman anymore. She was a mother, a survivor, just like me. By evening, the final move was in motion. Kate had drafted a carefully worded letter to Richard's employer, a subtle warning. No formal accusations yet, just enough to make it clear that if Richard tried to retaliate or smear Samantha or me, the full story would go public. A warning shot, Kate called it. I called it leverage. And it worked. At 6 p.m., I received the message I'd been waiting for. Richard's lawyer had emailed Kate's office. Client will comply with all demands, requesting expedited settlement. I sat back in my chair, the weight of months of anger and heartbreak lifting piece by piece. It wasn't over, not yet, but the war was won. That night, as I poured myself a glass of wine in my now empty house, I allowed myself a rare smile. Not of joy, not of triumph, of release. Richard Henderson had finally been brought to his knees, and I had done it without ever raising my voice. But some battles leave scars you don't see, and I wasn't sure yet how deep mine would run. Victoria has won the battle, but will she truly find peace? Stay tuned. The next chapter holds the answer. Chapter 6, The Woman Who Owned Her Name. Revenge doesn't heal, but it clears the space for healing to begin. That's what I told myself as I signed the last line of the settlement agreement 3 weeks later. My name, Victoria Henderson, printed clearly at the bottom. For the first time in years, I looked at it and felt something close to ownership again. Not as Richard's wife, not as a woman tethered to a life of broken promises, as myself. The final phase had unfolded swiftly after Richard's lawyer signaled surrender. Kate had worked through the financial disclosures with surgical precision. Every account was traced, every asset divided. By the time we finalized the agreement, Richard was stripped of everything that had once given him power over me, over us. He would pay alimony. He would fund a trust for Lily. He would relinquish any claim to the house, which I would soon sell. And he would disappear, legally barred from contacting Samantha or me. The morning of the signing, I dressed simply, dark jeans, a tailored blouse. No makeup, not a performance, not a mask, just meant to me. When I entered the conference room, Richard was already there, hunched over the table, eyes hollow. He barely looked up when I sat across from him. Good. I didn't need his gaze anymore. I needed his signature. One by one, we signed, guided by Kate and the attending notary. The sound of each pen stroke was a small, sharp satisfaction. By the time we reached the last page, Richard's hand shook. "Victoria," he began, voice hoarse. I didn't let him finish. "Don't," I said quietly. "Just sign." And he did. When it was done, I rose, collected my copy, and turned to leave. At the door, I paused. Not for him. For myself. Goodbye, Richard. I didn't look back. The following days were a blur of motion and clarity. I listed the house, hired movers, packed what mattered, left the rest behind. Too many ghosts lived in those walls. I was done keeping them company. I moved into a sleek downtown condo overlooking the river, a space that felt new, untainted, a space that belonged to me. And with it, I opened the doors to Victoria Henderson Events, my own event planning business. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was now helping people build perfect days when mine had been dismantled. But maybe that was the point. Maybe knowing how fragile perfection could be made me better at crafting it for others. 3 weeks after my move, a small envelope arrived in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, a photo. Lily? Smiling, chubby cheeks flushed, tiny hands clutching a new stuffed bear. On the back, in neat handwriting, "Thank you for giving us a chance to start over. Samantha." I pressed the photo to my heart, eyes stinging. This was the only validation I needed. Not Richard's regret, not a courtroom victory, just this small proof that something good had come from the wreckage. One evening, as I prepared for my first solo event, a small wedding in the city's botanical gardens, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I barely recognized the woman staring back, not in a bad way, in a stronger way. There were still scars, invisible but real, but there was also strength, clarity, resolve. I smiled, not for the reflection, but for the woman who had fought to see it again. I wasn't Sarah Morrison anymore. And soon, even Victoria Henderson would mean something entirely her own. Owning my name was one thing. Living it, that was the harder part. In the weeks that followed, I poured myself into Victoria Henderson events, planning weddings, corporate galas, milestone birthdays. It was strange how much joy I found in helping others build the moments they'd remember forever. Not because I needed to forget, but because I finally understood how fragile those moments were and how precious. The calls from Richard stopped completely after the settlement. No texts, no emails. I imagined Kate's letter to his employer had helped reinforce the boundaries. But in truth, I didn't care anymore. His silence was the loudest apology I'd ever get. And it was enough. One crisp Saturday afternoon, I stood in the kitchen of my condo, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I was preparing a small dinner party, something I hadn't done in years. There was laughter in my home again, music, the scent of roasted vegetables and fresh herbs. And for the first time since that cursed pair of baby shoes had tumbled onto my bedroom carpet, I felt light, whole. I reached for a bottle of wine when my phone buzzed. A text from Monica at Whole Foods. Guess who I just saw in the produce section? My fingers paused mid-reach. Who? I typed. Richard, alone, frozen dinners and beer in his cart. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Of course life would throw this test at me today of all days. Thanks for the heads up, I replied. Not my problem anymore. But fate had other plans. Later that evening, I ran out to grab an extra bottle of olive. The small specialty market near my condo was quiet at night, and there he was, standing by the apples, older, tired, smaller. For a heartbeat, our eyes met across the bins of fruit. The man who had once been my everything now looked like a shadow of himself. He opened his mouth as if to speak. I shook my head. Some conversations weren't worth having. I turned, paid for my oil, and left. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for a moment, waiting to feel something. Anger, sadness, pity. But there was only peace, the kind that comes when you've chosen your ending. That night, as I poured wine for my friends, laughter ringing through my home, I caught sight of Lily's photo on my fridge. I walked over, tracing the edges of the picture with my fingertip. 4 years old now, maybe 5. Starting school, learning to ride a bike, growing up without a father because her father had chosen his comfort over his courage. And yet, she looked happy. I smiled. That was enough. Before I turned away, I whispered softly to the photo, "If you ever find baby shoes in a suitcase that aren't meant for you, little one, I hope you remember my story, because sometimes the only way to write a happy ending is to first write a painful middle." I'd learned that the hard way, but I'd learned it, and that had to be enough. Because some stories don't need a perfect ending, they just need an honest one. Thanks for watching Day of Revenge. If you love drama, secrets, and jaw-dropping twists, you're in the right place. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more incredible stories.